Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Damona Peacock, a fabulous, non-binary, neurospicy ordained queerdo with a fascination for all things cycles, symbolism, and patterns.
And I'm Moonkittee, your queer femme, poly kitchen witch, and proud geek. Today's topic is ritual basics, sacred ceremonies, and etiquette. Whew, there is a lot in that title. But let's
Yeah,
break it
so we
down.
might need to break it down.
Yes, let's definitely break it down just a little bit. No, the reason we want to talk about it is there is a lot in that title, but ultimately they all kind of do tie together in a lot of
Sure.
ways. And we have definitely touched on this in different episodes in the past. I know when we were talking about planning this session, we're like, didn't we cover this? And we went back and we covered it in pieces, but not really put together. So this
Yeah.
is the catch-all primer of what are you going to do and look at when we're talking about ritual basics, sacred ceremonies, and overall etiquette when you're going to be attending any of those.
Right. So let's start with rituals, ritual basics. But the thing is, rituals can be public and they could be private. They could
Mm-hmm.
be just for you, or they could be for a group of your friends,
Mm-hmm.
or a group of your witches, your best witchy bitches,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be for public. Like you
Mm-hmm.
could be not just people you know, but you're inviting the public to I've definitely attended plenty of public rituals,
Mm-hmm.
and just know that their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yes.
they're completely different from one another.
Yes, absolutely.
And, humans, we love rituals. We
Mm-hmm.
love ceremonies. We did a whole episode on rites of passages a
Mm-hmm.
long
Right.
time ago. But ceremonies and rituals, it's something I think in our human nature that we're
Mm-hmm.
called, does something to our brain juices. It does
Mm-hmm.
something to our energy levels, our magic, and a lot of witches, a lot of magical practitioners dabble in or tend to engage with ritual
Mm-hmm.
or ceremony or
Mm-hmm.
both. So it's a
A
great
lot
topic.
of non-pagan
Oh,
practitioners deal with ritual in their religious practice in general.
hello, Catholic Church.
Yes, the
Catholic
Catholic to
Church,
pagan
lots of
pipeline.
churches.
Yeah, no, anything,
Yes.
honestly, any kind of formal thing like that is a ritual where you've got a structure and stuff like that. But we'll dive into that a little bit more. So, the basics of a ritual. If you're going to create a ritual, what would you need to do? And I think, like you said, the first step is to determine whether this is a ritual for you,
Yep.
whether this is a ritual for a small group of people, or whether this is a public ritual.
And then the next level is to consider that you could go casual or
Mm-hmm.
you could go formal
Mm-hmm.
or anything in between. So
Yes.
it depends on how deeply ritualistic you want to get.
Mm-hmm.
How formal do you want to be? How fancy do you want to make this? Is it a performance because you're entertaining guests or the public, or is it just a personal magic working for yourself? Some people want to bring in all the bells and whistles, want to build
Mm-hmm.
an elaborate altar and have roles assigned to different people to do different parts of the ritual. Or you could just come in and do your own ritual in 5, 10, 15 minutes or 2 hours. It just,
Mm-hmm.
again, this is a create your own adventure kind of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
I know I use that phrase a lot, but you have to consider how formal do you want to be, how casual, how quick, how deeply invested, how much time. Because the thing about ritual and ceremony is that you are setting aside time to be in the sacred,
Mm-hmm.
to be aligned with what is sacred to you, and to be in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
So then also considering the why.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we doing this? What's the intent? What's the purpose?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about a lot about focus and attention when we're
Mm-hmm.
working with energy, when we're working our magic. So you have to decide why are you doing a ritual? What are you doing it for? Is it a celebration
Mm-hmm.
for a time of the year? Are you celebrating the passing of the wheel of time? Is it a magical spell? Is it a working?
Mm-hmm.
Are you raising energy for no specific intention to be released for whatever personal, people who attend are in attendance, what they want the energy to go towards? Or are you all together raising energy toward one specific intention channeled to and through, whoever's leading the ritual, priest or priestess, or,
Mm-hmm.
holy person of some form or another. Again, ritual can be so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you are building a ritual, you kind of have to figure out why, what, who, what, where, when, why, how, right? All of
Right.
those W's and H. So yeah, you got a lot of decisions to make when you're building a
Mm-hmm.
ritual.
Right. The key concept to keep in mind is you're doing something to
Mm-hmm.
raise energy, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's a
With
single with multiple people or whatever else. So what is that energy going to go towards? And that's what that will ultimately shape the way your ritual will go out is where you're going to direct that energy towards.
And that's basically goes in the center of the ritual. That's what we call the
Mm-hmm.
working, right? So some different types of workings you can have, depends on what you're doing, right? And we'll get into,
Mm-hmm.
what those can be in a minute. But when I say you put it in the center, there's these book-ended things that you can do to set aside the sacred space with your intention and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And different traditions teach different ways of doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
Different traditions will have different orders in which you would do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it's what's your tradition? What have you been taught? What feels right to you? What did you read that felt right to you? Again, you have to seek these things. That I mean by bookending the working is that you start with creating an energy cleansing, a setting of intentions, creating a sacred space and protecting that sacred space, and inviting in whatever spirits you're working with into that space, and then you do the working, and then at the end you kind of have your own way of celebrating and releasing and sending that space off in a safe way as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we mean by ritual, and having like a form or a formula that you
Mm-hmm.
kind of follow.
Right. And I found it really interesting as we were kind of pre-discussing this topic and how we wanted to kind of break it down, that we both have very different, in a lot of ways, we have very similar ways that we encompass ritual, but we also have very different ways of encompassing ritual because we grew up in magical practices in completely different ways. You grew up
Yep.
initially in a
Uh-huh.
more coven structure where there
Yep.
was a larger organized group, and I've always grown up very solitary. So most of my
Yep.
rituals going as I've created them have been single person. Now we've collaborated together, and
Yeah.
we used to do these fabulous like children's rituals at Pantheacon,
Mm-hmm.
which were so much fun, and it was so much fun to create and collaborate and build this bigger public ritual kind of energy thing, which was really fun. But it's really interesting to see how our approaches are different for how we choose the order of things, but
Mm-hmm.
also what we're doing. But I love the idea of what you said with bookending things because you either way, how you do the middle portion is going to be completely dependent on you. But you do need to start with cleansing or clearing your space and creating a space for that ritual and releasing the energy ultimately at the end.
Yep, yep. So I was, brought up by a priestess and trained and taught to do ritual a particular way. And honest to gods, it was so long ago that I can't tell you specifically the exact way that, they did have their specifics, mind you. It's just
Hmm.
that my brain doesn't retain all that information all these years later.
Right.
But enough of it that I could kind of piece together what I think I remember we did.
Hmm.
But yes, there was always like a very specific way, and it would be different depending on if it were for just our group, our
Hmm.
coven, or if it was going to be for a public offering. And sometimes I think about like the more public rituals, or like what we did with Pantheacon for
Hmm.
the children's rituals, as sometimes a little bit of theater,
Hmm. Oh yeah,
spiritual, magical
very much
ritual
theater.
theater, because we're putting on more of a show,
Hmm.
and getting the public involved is definitely, but it's kind of like a group of us are putting this on for them. Whereas when it's with a group that you work with intimately, magically, or yourself, it can usually be a little bit more directed or have a purpose, a
Hmm.
lesson, or very magical, serious magical working or
Hmm.
purpose. So yeah, again, it could be all these different things depending on
Hmm.
what your approach is. But so I remember that, especially at like public rituals and group rituals, that we would always start with some kind of energy cleansing. So usually it would be, the people running the ritual, often back then, especially, was the priest and priestess. But, of course, we have a less gendered
Hmm.
approach to things these days. But the people running the ritual would first cleanse themselves and each other. And then they would welcome in the people into the circle space. And they may have done their own setup of an altar or cleansing of the space before the people are welcomed in. But there are, in the public ritual, there's a specific welcoming in and offering of a cleansing. And sometimes that's like a smudging with
Hmm.
incense or some kind of burning of something. It could also be with water or
Hmm.
salt water, can be like spritzed or sprayed, or a combination of these things.
Mostly, is it smoke, salt water, salt or water, Florida water? We've done as well as kind
Right.
of that clarifying and
Yep.
purifying kind of thing. Um, Sometimes you can ground on the outside before you step into a space, ground the energies that you have, go out of it, and you step into it with the intent of being into a clear space with a clear mind.
Yes, and
Um,
sometimes there's even a like an exchange of words like how do you enter the circle, and the
mhm.
response is supposed to be like in perfect love and perfect trust or something
Right.
similar to that, you know. I'm sure there's been theatrified in TVs here and there
There's
too, but
there's definitely a whole movie around perfect love and perfect trust. Better to enter the circle of fear, or better to fall upon this blade than enter the circle with fear in your heart. Bless
yeah,
you to
all of
craft
that.
1994. But
There you
there
go.
is, for those of us who are of the old school witchy bent, there is definitely some of that too. But there is that, for all that there is, it is very moviefied in a lot of ways, or
Right.
practical magic, or any of the other witchy
Yeah.
movies that are there. There's always a grain of truth in them that have been
Yep.
moviefied
And
up.
then there's a lot of ways that they get him wrong. Get
Oh
it
God,
very
yes,
wrong.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. With the idea of some of the basics of that idea of
Yeah.
coming into a space with the intention of doing something and letting everything else go behind, and
Yep.
and
Yep.
dropping off all the stuff that's not serving you to create this thing for a ritual.
Yes. So that you're not bringing in any, you know, bad energy or what happened to you that pisses you off this morning, or, you know, stress over the traffic or whatever it is, getting there late, you know, all of that energy is let go of, and you're just moving into with the intention of being a part of this working, to being present in the moment, and to letting this be what's your focus is and
Mhm.
not all that stuff.
Exactly, because all that stuff can harm the energy of something you're trying to build, because it's what's holding you
Especially when
back.
you're working with other people. It's not fair to
Yes.
subject them to, but we'll get into all that too,
Mhm.
because we're going to
Right.
talk about etiquette.
Yes. So
So,
from
okay.
this point, we've cleansed the space. We've got a sacred space that we have created,
Yep.
and we have now cleansed the participants, whether that's yourself, a group, whatever it is. Participants have been cleansed. What is next? What are
So,
the steps? And
what I remember being is that we would have people participate in calling the quarters or the elements, the directions, the four directions. So, depending on the group, I've worked with people who would start in north and call north, east, south, west. And then I worked with people who like to start in the east because that's where the sun rises. You know, everybody has their
Mhm.
traditions and they have their reasons, but east, south, west, and north. But you would essentially you would be going in clockwise direction, and you would call the quarters, the directions. Sometimes different people would be assigned to be the, you know, the holder of that energy, to call in the earth, to call in the water, to call in the fire, to call in the air.
Mhm.
They would be attending to, like, if I would be calling east, that's the element of air. So if that's my job, I would also be attending to putting incense on the burner throughout the ritual, because it's part of the area of the altar. So calling the quarters. And then if you're just by yourself, you can have them represented by different things, either on the altar, or you can just call them all four in all by yourself, you know. If you're just doing it and, you know, doing it for your friends, it just depends on how you want to do it. But the quarters are called in. So these are like, you're kind of building the castle walls, right? That's what
Mhm.
I'm thinking. You're bringing in the elements that build the castle walls. And
Mhm.
then after you bring in the elements, you build the castle walls. Or so you cast the circle, which is an energetic barrier between all that is out there and this space, this sacred space of the here and now, in which we are all gathered and focused into to do this working. So that is casting an energetic circle, a bubble of protection for the working, for the energetic vulnerability of participating in that working, and to keep all of the whatever negative energy or whatever out. And so there's a lot of people will use a sword or an athame or a wand to cast the circle. Sometimes if it's a big group, or, you know, they would go around the
Mhm.
entire circle of people casting this circle energetically. And then you bless the circle, you bless the space. There is often a circle blessing, of some kind, which sometimes be used an invoking pentagram and a spoken word poem of some kind. I wish I could remember the circle blessings because they were so beautiful, but I don't. That was so long ago. I don't retain that information.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you call in, and I think of this castle, right? So the circle, the energetic circles created the moat, and you've built the walls. And once you have this beautiful ritual space, this castle built, energetic castle created for your working, for your ritual, for your community, you then also want to invite in the spirits that you're choosing to work with. Sometimes it's just a very general god and goddess. But again, like I said, sometimes we work with less gendered energies,
Mm-hmm.
or you could even call in specific deities, depending on, again, what are we celebrating? What working are we doing? Whose help do we want to, invoke or invite? And often you do it in different ways. You can light candles to them. You can speak poetry to them. Um, what other ways would you invite spirit in?
Yeah, so for me as a solitary practitioner, again, coming out without direct guidance and stuff, I've been thinking about this and going, how did I really do those rituals? And a lot of it is again, I would create the sacred space with that intent, but I would cast my circle, call my elements, and call in spirit and deity all at once. So I wouldn't do those as separate steps. So I would cast a circle first. And I had a cantrip that I had created. It was circle 3 around me, and close within and close without. Perfect balance is what it's all about. Harming none and helping all is how it shall be. This I make true by the power of 3. And I would circle 3 times
Mm-hmm.
clockwise around that. And then I would go and then I would call upon the elements and the guardian of the watchtower for each direction.
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time, I would call on the elements and the spirit to protect it at the same time. So I would call upon the guardian of the watchtower to the east, guardian of air, sunrise,
Mm-hmm.
communication, come in and protect and watch over my circle. And I would circle around again clockwise around that. So I would do that element and that spirit in one step when I was doing
Oh,
it.
and oftentimes when we're calling the quarters, we're also lighting a candle of that color for them.
Right. I would not. I would take for each quarter, I would have an elemental representative
Yeah.
posted at each corner. So for
Yep.
east, I would have, that's where my air and my incense would be. And then when I
Right.
moved from east to south, that's where I would have a candle station. And then
Mm-hmm.
to west, I'd have water and then a bowl of earth or rice or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the center, whichever, though I did have a central space, no matter where I did it, and
Right.
it would be dependent on whether what I was going for, which direction my altar would be set up in. I
Right.
would have, and that central off altar also a smaller represents of each individual element and a focus of some sort for deity to come
Mm-hmm.
in to help with that. So it was slightly different in the ways that I did them, some of these steps combined into one step rather than doing it separate. So again,
Yep.
as ways you can do these as customizing ritual for you versus for the way
I
you do
often
things.
think about when I was raised in a tradition in a coven that the priestess was training people up, and so she wanted to break these public rituals into different parts so that people who were a part of the group putting on the ritual would all have their own roles,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So I think that
Absolutely.
it got, you know, created in a specific way because it gives, more participants, more people learning.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can see why she set it up the way she did. When I'm doing ritual by myself, I am way cash, super cash. Like I'm not going to get up and cast a circle. I'm sitting in that energy and I'm casting it with my mind. I will
Mm-hmm.
sit at the altar. I don't need a huge giant bubble. I just need my little personal space, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't when it's by myself, I keep it very casual.
Mm-hmm. Right. And even when I'm doing a ritual by myself, there's a formality level that I've
Yes.
done and also a more casual level. So like you said, it can go from completely casual to completely formal, but you can
Yep.
go in those steps as well, being a solo practitioner, just as much as you can take in
Yep.
all those steps as in a formal, more public or more multiple group situation of there.
Exactly.
So those are the things. But ultimately the steps are the same. The order's a little bit different, and like I said, I tended to combine things into
Yeah.
an order itself. But that ultimately what we're doing is we're talking about calling in the elements of the directions. We're casting a circle. We're calling in spirit, deity, or guides. All those things to create the initial opening, the opening ceremonies, if you will, of your ritual. From there, now we talk about like you're talking about the main action, the meat and potatoes, your inner working.
Yes.
And this is where the next step would be after you've created that space. So from there,
Correct.
what would you guys do?
Well, again, it just depends on what the purpose of the ritual was. So if we're like celebrating a Sabbath, sometimes there would be kind of like a play or, some kind of role playing that tells the story of the tradition of, whatever
Hmm.
that holiday was. Or there would be a guided meditation or a dance or some other way of raising energy and releasing it. If there was a spell working, sometimes it would be moon rituals too. If it was like full moon versus dark
Hmm.
moon, it would depend on, a lot of those would have aspectings where
Hmm.
the priestess or priest would embody a certain deity or spirit and would offer wisdom through that embodiment or that invocation. So, just the meat and the potatoes.
Hmm.
It can be all any kind of combination of any of these things. But yeah, we would do that, some kind of working
Hmm.
or
Same.
release it, raising and releasing of energy.
Hmm. Yeah, same thing. This is where in the main body, this is where I would do any spell work that I was going to do, read poems, do any sort of crafting or dance, or like you said, guided meditations. That kind of, like you said, all the same kind of thing as an
Yeah.
individual versus as a group. It kind of all
Mm-hmm.
ties together. And again, what is the focus of what your ritual is going to be?
Yep. Yep. And it also could just be like teaching on some specific topic. You know,
Hmm.
it could be some kind of educational experience. Like if we're doing a ritual on dream work, it could be
Hmm.
setting up a meditation so that we can do some dream work later in
Hmm.
in our sleep, sort of thing. Like I remember doing all kinds of different things in the mid working of the ritual, depending on what time of year it was and what time of moon phase we're
Hmm.
in, and why we're even gathering, whether it's for the coven itself or for the public rituals.
Hmm.
Public rituals for us were basically the Sabbats, the
Hmm.
high holidays, the solstices, the equinoxes, and the ones that are in between those.
Hmm.
Those were our big public rituals.
Right.
And they were often just parties and
Hmm.
celebrations
Hmm.
too,
Yeah.
which gets us into what comes after the working,
Right.
which,
Which, again, different things. So there's usually some sort of food feasting and toasting usually
yes.
comes after the after your action. So now you've done the action, you've done the work.
Yep.
There's lots of different things. So for you guys, they would do feasting and toasting. I love the idea that some of the energy and stuff is you're sharing with spirit, and some are what you're doing for you.
Yeah,
Um,
it kind of built a lot of camaraderie after you've done this amazing working together as a
mhm.
group. Then you kind of get to like, relax. People running the ritual would bless the food, and then everybody would pass around and they would get some. So a lot of times we would save parts of our food. You eat some and then you save some to libate, to give libations to spirit. And if there's anything on the food offering that you wouldn't particularly eat for any reason, whether you don't like because you don't like it or because you're allergic to it, you would not offer that to spirit.
Mhm.
So only take the food that you will eat and only offer to spirit things that you would yourself eat. Like if you drop something on the ground and you're not going to eat it, you don't offer to spirit, you just let the ants have it, that
Mhm.
sort of thing. So then we would feast, we would just have a little bit of food. And like we'd also have like big huge potlucks after the whole ritual. So this is just a little bit of, coming back to, after the big working, kind of coming back to ourselves and coming together as a group and camaraderie. And then we got to the toasting, and that was always my favorite part because sometimes it get a little rowdy. Everybody had their own poems and toasts that, or certain ways that they liked. So there's some that I remember. I always remember Pan was Pan, Pan, he's our man. If he can't do it, no one can. Or if you're down and feeling kind of scuzzy, let's drink a toast to the god who's fuzzy.
Mhm.
I Pan.
Mhm.
And of
I love
course,
it. So that's fun. And so you have libations of some sort that you'd then incorporate. Yeah, as a solo practitioner, I tended to do that afterwards. I wouldn't often do that inside the circle ritual.
And that makes a
But
lot
it
of
makes
sense.
sense. Hmm.
Yeah, I think it was again part of being in a group and having continuing to build that group camaraderie once you're
And that
coming
energy,
down off of the, yes, exactly.
bringing that energy
And
up even more.
it also kind of went from formality of the working to like this more casual like camaraderie, like everybody's kind of sharing the spirits that they like to work with and toasting to them, and it becomes like a kind of a bonding and personal expression moment. And then you kind of have to go back to work, right? You have to still bookend, you have the other
Hmm.
parentheses to close out, so you still have to close down the circle and finish the ritual
Hmm.
up.
Right. So you have to release the energy that you've created with this ritual. So how you're going to release that energy, whether you're grounding it, whether you're releasing it to the sky, however you choosing to let go of that energy.
Yep, yep.
Um,
You remove the circle in some way, shape, or form, suck up the energy and release it into the earth or into the ether, or,
mhm,
candles are blown out. You're free to go, you're free to stay. You don't command. That was a big
mhm,
one. You don't command the watchtowers, you invite them in.
mhm,
And when you don't release them and tell them to go, you invite them to come and go as they please,
mhm,
that sort of thing. But you would, basically release the formality of everything. You would let the energy go, close down the circle, blow some candles out, or snuff some candles out, depending on what your tradition is. Some people don't believe
mhm,
in blowing out candles. That's a whole other thing too.
mhm,
And you release the quarters, the guardians, you release the circle, and then you start tidying up everything.
mhm. And for me, when I was doing ritual, I would release the energy, generally grounded, or again sending it off
Mm-hmm.
to the entity that I was beseeching, or the
Mm-hmm.
energy that I was manifesting, the elements that I was
Mm-hmm.
working with. And then I had again another cantrip that I did for opening the circle back up again. And I can't remember what
Mm-hmm.
that is at the moment, but I would yeah, open it back up again. And then at that point, then I would do the cleanup, the closing of the space. And then for me, the final step after we bookended everything is you go back and you ground yourself because you've just
Yes.
had a lot of energy flowing through you.
Yeah.
And if you've ever participated in a ritual, and honestly, even if you haven't participated in a ritual, but you've been to a dance club, you've been to a bar on a really exciting night, or really part of a concert, and you feel buzzy at the end of something
Mm-hmm.
like that because of all the energy flow that's going through things. So it's the same kind of thing. It's taking a moment to ground yourself back down. And that's where, at that point, that's when I would consume food and drink
Correct.
and everything to
Yes.
kind of bring myself back into that
And
space.
and very often the ritual food and libations and offering were one thing, but at the end of the ritual there would be a big potluck that we as a group would all have participated in creating, and we would all
Hmm.
feast. And because eating and drinking and putting, stuff, sustenance in your body can be very grounding back to
Hmm.
earth, out of the ethereal sacred space and more into, you know, mundane life.
Right. Absolutely.
So eating food is a very good way of grounding. Sometimes chocolate is seen
Hmm.
as a very grounding element, some kind of self care. But even just touching grass, hugging trees,
Hmm.
and oftentimes, conversation.
Hmm.
How was that for you? What did that bring up for you? There'd be a lot of checking in too,
Hmm.
depending on who you're working with and all that good stuff.
Right. So that's a lot about rituals and what we've
Yes.
done and how things can be done differently in different orders. But they, again, they bookended, they've got different parts to it. What's the
Yeah.
difference between a ritual and a sacred ceremony?
Okay, I would say that they're their own separate things,
Hmm.
although a sacred ceremony can have like an element of ritual to it. It can
Hmm.
kind of have its ritual steps, a format that it follows. But I feel like sacred ceremonies sometimes more often than not stand on their own, although you can have a sacred ceremony being in the center of a ritual to be the working of a ritual. So you
Hmm.
could create a ritual to bookend a sacred ceremony. But more often than not, when I think of sacred ceremonies, I'm thinking of like hand fastings, weddings, anniversary celebrations,
Funerals.
milestones, funerals, exactly,
Yeah.
celebrations of life.
Yeah. Other big rites of passage.
Yes, there's also, there's different ones from different cultures that I'm not a part of, but like quinceañera, I think of
Mm-hmm.
as kind of a sacred ceremony in a
Mm-hmm.
way that has its very cultural traditions.
Mm-hmm. And other
Um,
initiations.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
initiations and
of
things.
course, initiations could be a sacred ceremony, and then that could be set up within a ritual.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that they kind of stand on their own. But a sacred ceremony can follow a particular formula and be ritualistic in that
Mm-hmm.
way. So, like wedding ceremonies have their traditions, and it traditionally goes first you do this, and then you do that, and then you have to have the vows, and then you have to exchange the rings, and then you got to do this and that, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
it can be ritualistic, but it's not necessarily a ritual.
Right. And that's kind of leads into the next question with regards to sacred ceremonies is there anything or what is done differently in a ritual than you would have in a sacred ceremony? And the first thing that comes to think of for me is we're talking about a sacred ceremony versus a ritual. As again, it has its own beginning, middle, and end like a ritual does, but it generally is over a longer span of time. And it has more pieces to it than a ritual does that may not be quite as focused.
And often I would think of it as being more formal, although
Mm-hmm.
with that said, it can also run the gamut between formal and casual.
Right.
It just depends on what you're doing it for and what the traditions you choose to follow, because just because it's a tradition doesn't mean you have to follow it.
Sacred ceremonies tend to be more group focused
I
than
agree.
ritual focused, like or than
Because
individual
oftentimes
focused.
they're a cultural thing, they're a
Mm-hmm.
cultural rite of passage a lot of times. So sacred ceremonies can be more often, I do think of them as group, a
Mm-hmm.
little more formal, a little bit longer in length. And I would say that usually the ceremony, feasting and celebration usually comes after the
Right.
ceremony versus in a ritual where the partying can start within the ritual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And same thing with those sacred ceremonies. There is a public nature to some of them, and there's also a private nature to them. And even a private nature can be kind of public. If you think about a wedding, for example, it's a private event, but it's still open to a number of people who may or may not be of the same faith, practice, belief
Invite
system,
only.
anything like that. So there's that kind of balance that it walks. Whereas maybe a sacred ceremony that's a funeral may be literally open to the public for anyone
Right.
who knows that person versus a very specific kind of group of people.
Yeah, right. So again, it just depends on the
Hmm.
reason you're doing the ceremony and who
Right.
you're doing it for or with.
Okay. So
Yeah.
now we've touched on sacred ceremonies and rituals. Let's talk about etiquette
Etiquette.
and
This
finally
is
this
very
out.
important. Yes.
Yes.
And well, my first one is don't be an asshole. Can we say
Yes.
that on TV? Can we say that
Yes,
on YouTube?
please.
Don't be
Seriously.
an asshole.
Doesn't matter.
Don't
Where you're going, whatever. Just general rule, don't be an asshole.
be considerate. So not
Hmm.
being an asshole means being considerate. Not making it all about you. It's not all
Yeah.
about you. Don't suck the energy out of the room. Don't be that person.
I said, don't make it about you if it's not about you. So,
It's
for
not about you.
example, if it's my wedding day, it better be about me because this is my day.
Fair. That's fair.
But yeah, but if I'm a guest at a wedding, it's not about
Don't make it
me.
about you.
It
Yeah.
don't make it about me. Don't make it about
Right.
you unless it's about you. So again, if you're talking about a birthday or a wedding or a quinceañera, like you mentioned, or other certain rites of passage, there is generally someone that it's about.
Right.
And if
And
the
let
person is
that be
about,
their
if it's
day.
not you, then don't make it about you.
Yes. And be considerate of the energy that you're bringing into the space. Again,
Absolutely.
so not just not sucking the energy out of the room or not making it all about you, but also if you ran into traffic and had like a road rage incident beforehand, don't bring that energy, that anger, that frustration, that anxiety, that stress into the ritual or the working or the ceremony that you're attending. If you can take a moment to yourself and release it before you get there, find a way to let it go and leave it behind you. Because when you're entering into sacred space or sacred ritual or
Hmm.
sacred ceremony with someone or a group of people, you owe it to those people, especially the ones that are putting this on for you, to really do walk in with that sense of I'm bringing my best self, I'm bringing my best energy into this, and I'm not going to bring, because I think of these things as like you're energetically soaking in a hot tub together, you know,
Hmm.
it's kind of an energetic human soup. And so the energy that you're bringing in, you're sharing with those that you're working with, and you're getting energy from them as well. There's a constant flow that often happens in these kind of social spaces when you're doing group workings or group ceremonies.
Hmm.
And you owe it to everybody to make sure that you're offering your best and you're receiving the best energy back.
Hmm. And if it's one of those things where you are late to the ceremony of whatever it may be, because you hit traffic, because you're frustrated, it makes sense that you're frustrated, you've got that anger. It's absolute, those moments especially, it's absolutely critical to ground yourself. Yes, you are already late. Now, can you join in a way that's respectful? It's better to
Yep.
sneak in quietly and observe
Hmm.
than to barge in angrily and
Yep.
make yourself a focus where you weren't necessarily meant to be. So taking that moment to ground, to calm, to release the frustration allows you to step into a ceremony in a way that's unobtrusive and allows you to
Yep.
blend into and receive that energy back a lot faster than if you're trying to push this stuff out before you can get more in.
Yep. And it takes a lot of social energy to
Yes.
attend and get involved in a ritual. It takes three times the amount at the very least to host,
Hmm.
to put on a public ritual. So
Yes.
be considerate of the work that people put in to create this
Hmm.
space, to create this working. I know that a lot of people will often be very excited after a class or a ritual or a working, and then they will often want to go talk to the people who put it on. And remember that, you know, maybe it took a lot of energy from you and you just showed up that, you know, they've been planning this for
Hmm.
days, weeks, months. So, you know, be very considerate of their energy as well.
Hmm.
Don't make it all about you. Don't suck the energy out of the room. And, you know, it's by all means give feedback. People want to hear feedback. We do want to connect. We want to know how it
Hmm.
went. But sometimes kind of read the room.
Hmm.
Give them a
Yes.
little bit of space at first. Give them a minute to ground themselves, to eat
Hmm.
something
Yeah.
before you
And
pile on.
absolutely. And I agree that you definitely give them a moment, but at the same time, you also need to understand if you're one of the ones conducting this kind of public ritual, that you are going to have people come up to you
Yep.
afterwards. So you need to maintain that in yourself and be prepared for that kind of aspect of it. So have on hands food or drink or something that you know you can get immediately into to help replenish that energy that you just used to be able to then help and talk and discuss the stuff that just happened with people who are interested. That's not saying you won't do more later, but have that, know that this is something that's going to happen and find ways to help prepare yourself for that kind of thing.
Absolutely, because I definitely once, like my little pet peeve over here, I attended a meditation one time that people came in and offered. There's like a group doing a thing, and then different people offering different classes. But these people came in and did this really deep, like meditation where you're supposed to go back and meet an ancestor or
Hmm.
a beloved dead, and you know brought people back up, and there were a few people that came back very emotional, very moved by the whole experience, and instead of getting any feedback or checking in or asking like, you okay, you know, there's some tears, do you
Hmm.
want to talk about it, they just bounced. They're like, all right, well, we got to go now, so see ya. And then that kind of left the participants to all kind of care for one another.
Hmm.
But I was just like, note to self, never be that person. Don't
Yeah.
be that person who drops the deep bomb of like, I'm going to dig you deep into this amazingly powerful meditation where you talk with your beloved dead and, you know, bring up emotional stuff. And the minute I bring you back, I'm bouncing. You know, no,
Right.
that's, it is your responsibility, you
Hmm.
know, to help people unpack their magical experiences if you're the one putting yourself out there offering this working or this
And
lesson.
yeah, and if you are offering something that you know is highly emotionally charged or something like that, think about having warders or wardens who can
Yep.
be designated to bring people back into their bodies. That
Yep.
was one of the things that I absolutely recommend or remember
Loved.
from the various high rituals that we would do at Pantheacon a long
Yep.
time ago is we had a couple of friends who were like, I am here to ground you, because you would come back out of it and because ritual would end because it's a short time frame, you had so much
Yep.
thing, there really wasn't time for the aftercare and feasting that you would get into things. So you would come out and you would just be buzzing, and
Yep.
you don't know what to do with it. You can't focus. You can't figure out where you're going. And just going to someone who's like, nope, I am focused on grounding energy. And just they can put your hand on your shoulder, they can be a hug, whatever you're comfortable with in regarding touching, even just sometimes a hand on a hand or something like that. Taking that moment to just feel their calm energy to bring and ground out that buzzing. So if you know that you're going to have something that's going to bring this up, make sure you
Mhm.
have people who can assist with energetically bringing people back into their bodies who are outside the ritual. They can watch it, but they're not participating in the ritual. They're staying purposely outside the ritual to bring you back in afterwards.
Like warders or guardians. Like I remember
Mm-hmm.
specifically different groups at Pecan, which is a pagan convention that we used to attend, would they had 90 minutes for their ritual
Mm-hmm.
offering. You know, you had these very strict schedules. So they would say, you know, our hospitality suite is room number whatever. If you need any more help grounding or, you know, anything
Mm-hmm.
that was brought up for you during this ritual that you want to process with one of our warders, one of our priests or priestesses, you could come to this room, you know, after the ritual and we'll have someone here who can help you. And I
Mm-hmm.
just deep respect for that move.
Yes.
You know, I think ritual aftercare is sometimes very necessary.
So incredibly necessary. And same
Because
thing.
sometimes, and if it's just by yourself, you got to give that to yourself too.
Hmm. And that's sort of thing, regardless if you're going to a pagan event or even just any event where you're going to be there for long periods of time, you
Hmm.
need to make sure that you are after caring yourself
Yep.
in that you are drinking water, you
Hmm.
are eating food, you are taking moments to sit in the shade if it's outside, and taking those moments because otherwise you're going to deplete yourself and you could cause yourself injury, whether it's sickness, bodily injury, a lot of different things. So really making sure that you are prepared for what you're going to be doing and bringing that in.
Also, give consideration. Are you an energetic sponge? Did you
Yeah.
go to this public event and just soak up everybody's energy because it's buzzing around? You got to release that. You don't want to
Hmm.
like burn yourself out like over an overcharged battery, right?
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
an over caffeinated squirrel. That's like the last thing we need.
Yeah. You will go, and then you will crush.
Yeah, exactly. So just remember the self care and remember the community care.
Hmm.
So part of ethics.
And then the last one that I have as part of etiquette, when we kind of touch on it a little bit, but be respectful of the timelines. Like I said, we
Right.
went to points where their ritual was you have 90 minutes.
Yeah.
This is your window. So
You got to
unless
show up
there's
on time.
yeah, you gotta show up on time. Now, obviously if you're driving to some place, sometimes shit happens and you're late because there's traffic or there's something else that gets you late. Unless it's an emergency and due to something else, don't be late and don't leave early. That's the
Right.
thing. Either way, it breaks the circle and the spike the energy in a way that can be really
Sorry.
challenging to control potentially, or can be really distracting. So don't be late and don't leave early unless it's an absolute emergency.
Absolutely. Be respectful of timelines and don't leave the circle. Like go to the bathroom
Yeah,
before we start ritual. You know, make
absolutely.
sure that when you're coming in to something like that, you're not going to have to interrupt or disrupt the working to go take care of things outside or you know, and here's the thing. And if you are late to the ritual or the event and you aren't able to get in, you know, it's okay to just respectfully not attend it.
Hmm.
It's sometimes it's best to not take your bad energy and lateness into a ritual and interrupt and make it all about you. Sometimes it's okay to admit defeat and say like, okay, today is not my day.
Hmm. By the same token, in this modern age, get off your phone and be present. This is something that, again, it's a Burning Man principle. Be present in what you're doing. I'm not saying that there can't be moments where you have to check in, but during a ritual, during a sacred ceremony, during
Your
any of
phone
these
should be
things,
off
your
and not
phone
even
should be
on
off.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you can't take your phone off for whatever reason,
Silence.
because you are expecting an emergency thing, whatever it may be, maybe consider not attending that ritual.
Right.
And that can be a hard thing because it can be something you really want to do. But if you know that you have to be tied to your electronic device for an hour and a half and you cannot get out of it in any way, shape, or form, you have to decide what is the bigger priority. You
Yep.
can't be in a ritual and be on your phone. You have to be present. Otherwise, it's going to, again, disrupt the energy of everything else around them.
Yeah. And just Be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, come in with respect, learn something new. It might not be the way you were taught to do things because
Mm-hmm.
people, again, they have their own traditions, they have their own
Right.
approaches, they have their own way of doing things. And when you're attending a public ritual, you want to be respectful, participate the best you can. Sometimes you can do things your own way. Like when, I've seen where people have different, like, ways that they want to hold their body or themselves, their
Mm-hmm.
hands when people are calling in elements, they want to open themselves up to receive. You can do your own thing, but also just be respectful of the environment, read the room, and learn something new.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to do things a little differently
Mm-hmm.
because you're learning from someone else who has a different approach.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've got this pretty well covered. What about you?
I think we got it locked up. I think I'm pretty proud of what we got.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening to the Queer Witch Project. If you like what you hear, make sure you give us a comment or some thumbs up and 5 or 10 stars or however many stars, and tell us what you do for rituals
Mm-hmm.
and sacred ceremonies.
And if there is a topic you want to know more about or an episode topic you'd like to suggest, contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram with the handle @queerwitchproject. We upload every other week. And remember, queerness is a key to magic.
Be yourself and love rebelliously. Bye.
Bye.